All right, so are you ready to dive into something kind of unexpected today?
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at how to harness your anger, you know,
Oh,
to achieve your goals in 2025.
interesting.
I know, right? That sounds a bit crazy, almost like you're trying to tame a wild beast or something.
Yeah.
But uh, the source we're looking at is this motivational piece, and it actually argues that, anger can be a really powerful tool
Okay.
when it's used strategically, of course,
Right.
for success.
Mm. It's a bold claim for sure,
Yeah.
but there is some interesting psychology behind it.
Okay.
Like, have you ever just felt this surge of energy
Oh, yeah.
or motivation after like a moment of frustration or anger?
Totally. Like that I'll show them kind of feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this source is tapping into.
Okay.
It lays out this 3-step process for turning that raw emotional energy into something productive.
Okay. I am intrigued. Lay it on me.
Okay,
The
great.
step one.
All right, so step 1 is all about understanding the root of your anger.
Okay.
The source calls it identify the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about suppressing it or anything,
Right.
but more like getting curious about what's actually causing it.
So it's kind of like detective work
Yes,
for your emotions.
precisely.
I
So
see.
imagine you're working on a project
Okay.
and like a colleague just throws a wrench in the works,
Oh.
right?
Hmm?
Your first reaction might be anger, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But if you just like take a second
Okay.
to examine the situation, you might realize that anger is coming from somewhere else.
Okay.
Like a deeper feeling, maybe you felt disrespected or like your work wasn't valued.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So by identifying the root cause,
Yes,
you can start to control it
exactly.
instead of it controlling you.
And that's where the second step comes in.
Okay.
Channel the energy.
Okay.
The source says once you get that trigger,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to redirect that energy towards something good.
Okay, so instead of getting caught up in the frustration,
Yep.
you use it as fuel
Yes.
to find a solution.
Exactly.
Or come back stronger.
That's the idea.
All right.
The source gives the example of athletes
Okay.
who use the anger they feel after a loss to push themselves harder in training.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right.
I've definitely seen that kind of focus in athletes.
Yeah.
They can just harness that frustration and turn it into pure determination.
Totally.
But how do you actually channel that energy effectively?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The source doesn't actually give specific techniques,
Mm-hmm.
but research shows that things like mindfulness
Why?
and focused breathing
Okay.
can help you manage that surge of energy.
So instead of letting the anger overwhelm you,
Yeah.
you can use these techniques to create focus and clarity.
Exactly.
So it's almost like turning up that emotional heat into a laser beam
Yeah.
of concentration.
Precisely. And by staying present and focused, you can avoid those impulsive reactions
Yeah.
and make better decisions.
This is reminding me of the idea of flow state,
Oh, yeah.
where you're so absorbed in what you're doing
Yeah.
that you lose track of time and everything just clicks.
Right.
Could focused anger help tap into that state?
I think there's definitely a connection there.
Okay.
Think about it. Anger can make you feel more alert
Yeah.
and energized, which could be good when you need to really focus on a task.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've identified the trigger.
Yeah.
We've channeled the energy.
Uh.
What's at the final piece?
Right. The third step is super important.
Okay.
Create a vision.
Yeah.
The source really emphasizes this part
Okay.
because without a clear goal, all that energy can become chaotic
Right.
and destructive.
Yeah, like having a powerful engine without a steering wheel.
Exactly.
Oh.
So you're saying that even though anger can provide that initial spark, you need a clear direction to actually make progress.
It's not just about feeling fired up.
Right.
It's about knowing where to go with it.
Exactly. The source uses this phrase, anger with a purpose.
Oh, I like that.
It's not about lashing out
Right.
or getting stuck in negativity.
Yeah,
It's about channeling that intensity towards something meaningful.
that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It's like you wouldn't just start running without knowing where you're going.
Yeah.
You need a destination.
Yeah.
And in this case, the destination is your goal,
Exactly.
fueled by that focused anger.
Having that vision can also help you manage the intensity of the anger.
Okay.
Instead of being overwhelmed by it, you can see it as like a resource
Yeah.
that's helping you move towards something you care about.
So it's about transforming that I'll show them
Right.
energy into I'll show myself
I like that.
motivation.
It's about taking ownership of your emotions
Yeah.
and using them to drive your own success.
This is all starting to feel very empowering.
Right.
But I can also see how this could go wrong
Yeah.
if someone's not careful.
Yeah, you have to be really careful.
Are there any downsides or risks
Yeah, that's a great question.
to using anger as fuel?
And it leads us to one of the most important parts of this approach.
Okay, with that.
Self-awareness.
Hmm.
You need to be able to see when your anger is becoming destructive,
Right.
or when it's coming from a place of hurt
Hmm.
that needs to be addressed in a different way.
So it's not about giving yourself permission to just be angry all the time
No, not at all.
or using it as an excuse for bad behavior.
It's about understanding the power of the emotion
Okay.
and learning how to use it strategically and responsibly.
So that's where emotional intelligence comes in.
Exactly.
Now, I've heard that term before, but I'm not really sure what it means.
Oh, okay.
Could you break that down?
Of course. So emotional intelligence is basically the ability to understand and manage
Okay.
your own emotions,
Mhm.
as well as recognize and respond to the emotions of others.
Okay, so in this case, emotional intelligence would mean being able to see when you're angry,
Yes.
understand why,
Exactly.
and then choose how you want to respond
Exactly.
to that anger.
And that's a skill that takes practice and
Ah.
self-reflection.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like this whole anger is fuel thing requires a balance, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
You need the fire, but you also need the control to make sure it doesn't,
absolutely.
burn out of control.
And that's why that emphasis on creating a vision is so important. It's like
Yeah.
having a map and compass to guide you through that fiery landscape.
And without that vision, would you say anger could actually become a hindrance
Oh, totally.
instead of a help?
Yeah, imagine someone who's constantly angry,
Right.
but has no clear direction or purpose.
Mhm.
They might be reactive, impulsive.
Yeah.
And ultimately they won't make any real progress.
That makes me think of historical figures
Oh, yeah.
or movements that were driven by anger and ultimately lost their way
Right.
because they didn't have a clear vision or strategy.
Yeah.
They had the passion, but without a path.
Yeah.
It just became chaos.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It shows how important it is to have both the fire and the focus.
Right.
Anger can be a powerful motivator, but it needs to be aimed at something constructive.
So how can our listener actually start to apply these ideas to their own life?
Okay.
Let's say they're feeling angry or frustrated about something.
Mhm.
What's the first step they should take to start channeling that anger in a good way?
I think that first suggestion from the source is great.
Right.
Identifying the trigger.
Right.
So encourage them to ask themselves, what's really bothering me about this?
Yeah.
What deeper emotion is fueling this anger?
So it's about taking a moment to pause
Yes.
and examine the situation before reacting.
Hitting the pause button
Right.
on your emotions.
Exactly.
That pause can be so valuable because it lets you respond thoughtfully instead of just reacting without thinking.
And I imagine that pause is also where those mindfulness and breathing techniques come in.
Oh, absolutely.
Taking a few deep breaths
Yeah.
or practicing mindfulness.
Those can be super effective
Yeah.
for regulating your emotions and shifting from reactive to proactive.
Okay, so let's say our listener has identified the trigger,
Mm-hmm.
taken a moment to calm down.
Okay.
What's next?
So now it's about channeling that energy
Right.
towards a specific goal. This is where creative vision comes in.
Okay.
Think about a goal you're working towards right now, something you're really passionate about or motivated by. It could
Mhm.
be a personal project or a career goal
Okay.
or even a social cause you care about.
And the idea is to use that anger,
Yeah.
that sense of urgency, to fuel your efforts towards that goal.
Exactly.
So instead of letting the anger simmer
Right.
and maybe lead to negative stuff,
Yes.
they can redirect it to something productive.
It's about taking that raw energy and turning it into action.
So it's like taking that feeling of, I'm so frustrated,
Yeah.
and turning it into, I'm going to use this to make a change.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about harnessing that emotion
Right.
and making it meaningful.
But this whole process seems like it takes a lot of self-awareness and discipline.
For sure.
How can our listener cultivate those qualities?
That's where practices like journaling and self-reflection can be really helpful.
Okay.
I'd encourage them to spend some time each day
Okay.
reflecting on their emotions,
Yeah.
identifying those triggers,
Mm-hmm.
and tracking how they're responding
Okay.
to tough situations.
So by paying attention to their patterns,
Yes.
they can start to gain more control over how they respond to anger and other emotions.
It's about strengthening that emotional intelligence muscle.
I like that.
And the more you work on it, the better you get at navigating those emotions.
It's like we're all explorers navigating the terrain of our own emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need the right tools and strategies.
Right.
The source gives us a good starting point, but it's just one approach.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution for anger.
Right. The key is to find what works for you
Yeah.
and makes you feel more in control.
And I imagine that might involve trying different things.
Yeah.
Seeing what works.
Exactly.
Like I said.
And maybe even talking to a therapist or a coach
Yeah.
if you need help.
Speaking of support,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that not all anger is the same.
That's a really important point.
Sometimes anger can be a sign of something deeper,
Yes.
like maybe past trauma or a mental health issue,
Right.
or even just bad communication in a relationship.
You have to distinguish between healthy anger,
Yeah.
which can be motivating,
Right.
and unhealthy anger, which can be harmful.
So if someone's struggling with anger that feels out of control
Yeah.
or is causing problems,
Yeah.
it's important to reach out for professional help.
Absolutely. A therapist can help them understand the root causes,
Yeah.
develop coping skills,
Right.
and learn healthier ways to express and manage their emotions.
It sounds like it's really important to understand, the nuances of anger
Yeah,
and to know when to seek help.
for sure.
But for someone who's ready to experiment with this idea
Okay.
of anger as fuel, what are some practical steps they can take?
Well, one thing that really stuck out to me in the source was the focus on action.
Okay.
It's not enough to just identify the trigger and channel the energy. You
Yeah.
have to actually do something with it.
So it's about translating that energy into action.
Exactly. Think about that goal we discussed, that
Yeah.
vision,
Mhm.
and break it down into smaller steps.
Okay. So instead of being overwhelmed by this big goal,
Yeah.
they can just focus on those smaller, more manageable tasks,
Yes, like creating a roadmap
Right.
for their anger.
guiding it towards that destination one step at a time.
That's a great way to put it. And sometimes those first steps can be the hardest.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Starting is the biggest hurdle.
Procrastination, fear, self-doubt.
Ugh. Yeah,
Those can all get in the way.
big time. But you're saying anger can actually help push us past those obstacles.
Exactly. Think about it. Anger can make us more impulsive,
Okay.
more willing to take risks.
Right.
And that can be bad in some situations, but it can actually be good when you need that extra push
Okay.
to get started on something.
So it's like using anger as that catalyst
Yeah,
to break through those mental barriers and take that first step.
exactly.
It's like, I'm so frustrated, I'm just going to do it right now.
That's the spirit.
And once you take that step, the momentum builds.
Exactly. You start seeing progress,
Yeah.
and that fuels your motivation.
It's like that feeling of satisfaction
Yeah.
when you finally do something you've been putting off.
It can be addictive in a good way.
It makes you want to keep going.
And as you keep making progress,
Yeah.
that initial anger can change into determination, resilience, even excitement.
So it's not about staying angry. It's
No.
about using that anger to get started
Right.
and then letting that action fuel your motivation.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about turning that raw emotion into something that creates positive change.
This has been a really insightful conversation.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I'm definitely looking at anger in a new light now.
Me too.
But before we wrap up, is there anything else our listeners should keep in mind
Mm.
as they start to experiment with these ideas?
I think the biggest thing is to approach this with curiosity and self-compassion.
Okay.
It's a journey,
Mm.
and there will be times when you mess up
Right.
or fall back into old habits.
So it's not about being perfect.
No.
It's about being willing to try things out, learn, and adjust.
Exactly.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone.
Right.
If you're struggling, reach out for support.
Talk to a friend, a therapist.
Yeah.
A coach, anyone you trust.
Like we were saying, having the right support can make a huge difference
Absolutely.
navigating those tricky emotions.
And as you keep exploring this idea of anger as fuel, think about this.
Okay.
How can you use this to not just achieve your goals, but also make a positive impact on the world?
That's such a great question.
It's not just about personal gain.
Right.
It's about using our emotions, even anger,
Yeah.
to create something good.
Well said.
You have the power to turn your anger into a force for good.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course.
We hope you learned some new things and feel inspired to explore your own emotions.
Yeah.
And remember, as you go about your day, you can choose how you respond to those challenges, how you channel your energy,
Absolutely.
and how you use your emotions to shape your life and the world around you.
Well said.
Thanks for listening.